All right. It's your boy Pastor Mike, aka 90s number 5, and welcome to the 11th hour. So I have a good friend that's gonna be in with us today. So like we like to do a little bit. And now I know you're not really a big, dancer or whatever, but I remember back in the day you used to groove a little bit. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. We just having a little fun in here. Remember, we talk about our youth, we talk about our families, we talk about community. And so today we're going to continue the subject of mental health. And so today I have a mental health guru, right? That's what we're going to say. We got a mental health guru in here with us today. And so I'm going to let him just take the mic. He's going to introduce himself and what he does and how do you get into all of this.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it's good to be here. My name is Tom Starling, and I live just outside of Nashville. And it's funny how I got into this position, but I had worked with the Alzheimer's Association. I worked with United Way, and then with a group called Mental Health America.
Right. Okay.
And only in the last couple of months did I start working for Rogers Behavioral Health.
Okay.
They really specialize in more intensive, specialized mental health areas.
Okay.
And I am their executive director of community strategic partnerships.
So he's big time, y'all. He big time.
I don't know about that.
He big time. So we're excited to have him. Now, me and Tom, we go way back. We go way, way back. Back in the day, we kind of connected at the church that we were at, and we were small grouping together. And I think our platforms were a little different at the time, but he's just an all around person. Like, he just has this great personality, and we just kind of hit it off, right? Like, just hit it off. Our families did and everything.
We really did. Yeah, I still enjoy seeing you when I can, but it was always something we look forward to coming. We always did the night church thing.
Right. Then the Super Bowl gatherings that we used to do, Super Bowl, and he'd come over and we jab each other. It was more about the food, really.
It always is.
It's more about the food, and we never did really watch the game anyway. We just eating and just kind of hanging out with everybody. So today, we're going to ask Tom some questions about mental health, and especially, I'm really big about the Black community because I think mental health really gets overlooked in several ways. With the Black community, and not just the Black community. We just gonna say with the low income community. Period. A lot of times it just get overlooked. Especially with me, I've working in law enforcement for years. I've seen it. We're going to dibble dabble into that a little bit. And I don't know kind of how you feel about the whole police.
Sure.
Their training. And, and then when I had Miss Tempest on a couple of weeks ago, we even talk about mental health in the church, like how some of these pastors really need to see that some of our congregants are having mental issues, along with some spiritual issues too. So let's start there. I know I have a whole list of questions, but we're just kind of going to chat a little bit. So what do you think? What are your thoughts about that? About, pastors really getting some training on that mental health for their congregants?
I think it's really important. One of the Bible verses that's actually one of my favorites is Luke 2:52, how Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature, and in favor with God and man. And so it was the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and the social. Like he was very well rounded. And I think pastors don't pay enough attention to their burning the candle at all ends and working late at night and unrealistic expectations and really finding that work-life balance for ourselves. I mean, you probably know, pastors, they have high divorce rates and stuff like that too. So they're human. And I do think that they need to look at, where the world is, where they are, where their congregants and parishioners are, and really attend to their mental health. In fact, there's at the State Department of Mental Health, there's a guy named Monty Burks, and he works with certified recovery congregations and really helping congregations address depressions, addictions, and what's going on under the roof of their house.
So you mean there's like a place where like ex-church members go for mental health, for things that they've been through in the church? Is that what you mean?
He and his team will actually come into the church.
Okay.
How to work with depression and addiction, and some things like that to really become that certified recovery congregation.
Okay.
So
That's kind of cool. I've never heard that
yeah.
before. Well, shoot, there's a lot of churches they need to be hitting then. So.
Yes, yes. Any
It's a
church with
ton of church.
people. That's right. That's right.
Any church with people, he need to be there. Yeah, and you know, it just, you know, that's denial too. You know, a lot of pastors deny, you know, the mental health that they go through, the strain and all of that, and it's got to be tough. I mean, I was a pastor for a little while, not of a church, but just in my role, it was tough. So I can imagine some of these mega church pastors, and even if it's a small church, I mean, dealing with people on a daily is gonna be tough.
It is. And when, you have people that aren't happy, they're not content, they feel like they should be somewhere else. A lot of times it may be a mental health issue, but we're so accustomed to there's that stigma with mental health. It's far easier to say, well, you just need a kick in the pants. You
Right.
just have low character or
Yeah.
weaknesses.
Yeah.
Pray harder,
Pray
have
harder.
more faith, and those things are good and true. But I think that if there's a mental health issue, you may
Yeah.
also need therapy, medication, use your vacation and PTO
Oh my
time.
gosh.
I mean,
Yes.
there's a lot that we could do for your mental health, and we're quick to take care of our physical health if it's
Yeah, we are.
cholesterol or
Yeah.
headaches or something. But our mental health, we can't forget that either.
Do you think it's just something that we just don't even think about? Like, especially with the church, you know, and I have nothing against, you know, like you said, prayer and having that relationship with God, because you need that. But do sometimes we, like, you know, I just need to, like you said, I need to pray and fast, or I might need to just read my Bible more, or, you know, okay, all those things are good. But at the end of the day, yeah, you need some help. Like, do you think sometimes we just overlook that, and just as sometimes as a church, we just like, we just need to do this more, get into a different small group, or be a part of this group, things like that?
Yeah, we do. I mean, sometimes we think, well, we need to exercise, and people don't realize that that actually works with your endorphins and helps
Right.
your mental health. We
Okay.
sometimes say we need, prayer and fasting. Again, there's some mental health components in there too,
Yeah.
But I think when you strictly tell people you need mental health help, that they're very reactionary to that idea. And I didn't know this, Michael, because I'm not a clinician. And I always thought, yeah, counseling's probably good. Everybody needs someone to talk to.
Right.
But what I didn't realize is that counseling really shifts cognitively, it changes your brain. Like, you can see pictures of a brain before counseling and how it has structurally
Oh, really?
changed after counseling.
Okay.
And so you really never think of that therapy, that counseling, that talking to somebody as being evidence-based therapy that really changes you, but it does, and it can. And again, we attend to ourselves to be spiritually fit and physically fit. We need to also remember that there is that mental health component.
Be mentally fit. Be mentally fit.
Yeah.
And you know, like you said earlier, you know, kind of before we even got started, how athletes and actors and actresses and all these are kind of really bringing an awareness to that it's something that you need to take first, because really and truly, you can't do anything else unless you have that mental health.
Yeah, I'm so thankful that after the Iraq War, the Gulf War, these soldiers who came back and said they need help, Eddie George, many of the football players and athletes, many Olympians,
Right.
they all are, and they get it. I think younger people especially get it, that there is no health without mental health, that you
Right.
can't just treat your right arm or your left leg. You
Right.
have to treat the
The whole
whole
body.
person.
Yeah.
And fortunately, you kind of see that stigma, which is probably the biggest barrier to getting help. You're seeing that go down as people start to realize that they do need mental health.
Well, cool. So now where you work, I know you just started there, and you know, you the big dog down there, and you get things done. So I got a couple of questions I just want to ask you. So the methods that you guys use down there, the treatment center, is it evidence based, or is it more science kind of based treatments?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that what people don't realize is that you want to look for something that has cognitive behavioral therapy or
Okay.
dialectical behavioral therapy.
Okay, so you now you using these big words now, Tommy.
Yeah.
You got to break them words down
What-
for some of us.
What I'll say is, when you need help, don't go to like a life coach or
Okay,
somebody who
okay.
just says, I'm a psychotherapist. Go with somebody who is a licensed mental health therapist. People often say, do I need a social worker or a counselor or a psychologist, a psychiatrist? I mean, there's all these. Just make sure that they're a licensed
Okay.
therapist. And certainly that's what we use at Rogers Behavioral Health.
Okay.
And I will say at Rogers, it's a lot more specialized and intensive. You will be going there for like 3 to 8 hours a day.
Wow.
With things like, eating disorders or OCD, some very intense things that deserve more concentration and more time.
Okay.
But when it comes to some things like anxiety, depression, postpartum depression, you could probably go in and out of a therapist 1 hour a week or
Okay.
on a monthly basis and be able to really get the help that you need.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just make sure it's from a licensed therapist.
Okay. So now you guys really like you're more structured on just specific things for longer periods of time, but most of us really just need a couple of hours, a week or something like that with a therapist.
Yeah, and the way that I tell most people to search for that type of help, there's a couple of really good websites out there. One of them is the longest URL I've ever known. It's called Nashville Psychotherapist Institute.org.
My goodness.
I know.
Okay.
So if you go to Nashville Psychotherapist Institute.org, you can put in that you want a Black social worker who speaks Spanish and will see you on mood disorders with Blue Cross Blue Shield on the weekend.
Wow.
I mean, you can really mine down.
Okay.
And it'll find the closest person to your area based on zip code. There's also in the greater Nashville area a really great one. If you just Google My Healthcare Home,
okay,
it'll connect you to charitable clinics
that really
have mental health.
Okay.
So if you have TennCare or nothing and you just need help, they often have openings. Too many of them take insurances as well. But but if you just go to My Healthcare Home, you can find your nearest charitable clinic, which is really great. And for everybody else, particularly outside of Nashville, the two that I often recommend, you could just dial 211.
Yeah, 211.
And
is that through United Way, right?
It is.
Yeah, okay.
And I mean, you could find housing or food pantries, but you could also find mental health care.
Okay.
And the other one to Google, it's kind of funny. It's called Aunt Bertha.
Aunt Bertha.
AuntBertha.com.
Okay.
And it's like a giant 211. It will.
Oh, okay.
It'll do very similar. It kind of gives you the broad strokes. But those are some great opportunities to find the right help at the right time.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be my next question. Is mental health expensive, or can it be expensive?
It can be. Sadly, a lot of therapists don't even take insurance anymore.
Wow.
It's just pure cash. I would say something like 60 to 75% of them only take cash. So that's very difficult. But you can find Christian ministries, churches, charitable clinics, and of course, usually on the back of your insurance card, you could call that number, and get some leads. The thing is, a lot of times if they take insurance, they're going to be full. They're not going to be taking new patients.
So why do you think they just? I mean, I'm sure they don't want to deal with the insurance bureaucracy. Is that why they just go straight cash?
It is. I think that to get reimbursed by insurance, it just gets harder and harder if you don't dot every I and cross every T on the paperwork to get reimbursed. And so you'll end up spending, another $100 of your time just filling out paperwork to
I got you.
Get paid back.
Just straight cash, homie, is what they say, right?
It is. It is. Oh,
just straight cash.
Another one. I would say universities, especially if universities teach people to be a therapist or a social worker, you could go there for some discount therapy as well.
Okay.
And while it might not be done by a newbie, they're being overseen and supervised by some real real
Right.
experienced
Now, do
clinicians.
you see it? Now, you mentioned, because we just had that conversation about the churches. If people go to churches for counseling and use that as a resource, would they have a lot of licensed people in those churches?
They do. I mean, sometimes churches will just have a support group, and that's what some people need. You could even go to a group like NAMI in the community, and
Hmm.
NAMI groups or church groups will have some support groups that are great to say, this is what worked for me, this doctor, this medication, this
Okay.
therapy. But churches typically do have, especially the larger churches, will have a licensed therapist on staff.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So how do you know when you need mental health? How do you what's some signs when you're like, man, I just need help. Like I can't do this no more.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great question. There's two things that I tell people to do. Number one, listen to the people around you.
Okay.
Even if you think they're wrong, people like family members and close friends, they probably are seeing that you're not yourself.
Hmm.
And if you're a good friend, you'll listen to them.
Okay.
The second thing I would suggest is there's a great place to go just for a free mental health screening.
Okay.
Um, and because, frankly, I mean, some of us all may have been part of the worried well until COVID, and now we
Oh,
could be diagnosed
yeah.
with clinical anxiety or
Right.
depression.
Right. Right.
But if you want to take a quick, anonymous, evidence-based screening,
Okay.
you could go to MHA. It's run by Mental Health America.
Okay.
So it's MHAscreening.org. And you could take a screening for depression, trauma, uh, eating disorders, addictions, workplace wellness. I mean, I take that workplace wellness every Monday morning. I mean, but
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
great screenings that
Okay.
really say you are moderate or you're severe or you're positive for bipolar
Right.
and then they lead you to both some self-help tools as well as some local resources where you could call and make an appointment.
Okay. Okay.
So mhascreening.org is really great. And then lastly, I would just say that if you're to the point that you're probably not enjoying things you always enjoyed,
Yeah.
if whatever's going on is interfering with your appetite, you're eating too much or you're not eating at all, or you're
Mhm.
sleeping too much or not sleeping at all, those two are signals.
Okay.
We wrongly think like depression is having the blues,
Right.
and depression, I mean, it makes you irritable, it makes you feel like you're working underwater, and
Yeah.
it does impact your sleep and your appetite and your lifestyle.
Well, I appreciate that time. I appreciate that time. The Rogers Behavior Group, right? That's who
Yeah.
you with. So we
Yep.
appreciate you being in. So we're gonna jump into this whole parenting thing. I mean, can kids drive us seriously? Like, you hear, man, they driving me crazy. Y'all driving me crazy. Literally, can they do that to some parents? Literally.
That's a really good question. I think that, you read these horrible stories about parents who shake their babies to
Right.
death. And I am convinced that that is not a sick, terrible, demon possessed parent. I think that the kid's crying for 3 days, they have colic, um I think to some degree you kind of snap.
Hmm.
And so there is, that point to where I think parents and caregivers, they need a break, especially if it's grandparents taking care of grandchildren.
Right.
I think that some type of respite and some type of break, because we all talk about work-life balance. Well, if you're a full-time parent or a full-time caregiver, there is no break.
That's true.
So I
That's
would
true.
just say to look at self-care when it comes to those instances. But yeah, I know. I told you I used to work for the Alzheimer's
Yeah.
Association. That's a old people's disease, but sometimes I feel like my kids have Alzheimer's. I'm like, can you not keep your head on your shoulders and
Right,
remember
right.
anything?
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
I don't know if that's just a kid thing. Like they don't remember nothing,
no,
like nothing at all. But that, and that's a group. When we talk about community, especially in low income communities, you have a lot of grandparents that are taking care of kids. And so when we see that, like, how could we? I know you don't know the answer to this. Maybe you might know the answer to this. Would you encourage people to help those grandparents out, especially those that are around them because they're older, they don't have the energy, they don't have the strength, they just don't really, honestly, they don't have the mental capacity anymore to raise these kids. They need maybe more breaks than some parents, maybe, you think?
They really do, and they're also a population that has a hard time asking for help.
Yes.
I mean, they might tell their minister and then nobody else that they're
Right.
kind of, and I would really suggest if there's a lawn you could mow, if there's a break you could give somebody just to go, have lunch somewhere and you watch the kids. That is so great. And if you are older, what I would suggest, I love this. Somebody had a fish bowl and
Mhm.
it had stuff in there. When people said, "Can I help? Let me know if I can help with anything," and then they run off. This person learned. They said, "Go to the fish bowl."
Pick
They're like,
something.
"What?" And they picked it up, and it was like, "Can you mow my yard? Can you make me a meal? Can you do this?"
Oh,
And if you
wow.
don't like what you picked up, put it back in and get
Pick
something
something
else out of
else.
the fish
That's a great
bowl. But
idea.
for people that aren't used to asking for help, be prepared and take people up on that, because it's not just a hi, how are you? People say, let me know if I can do anything. They really don't know what to do. So that's a
Right,
good way
right.
to get help.
You know what I've learned? If you say, Mike, is there anything you need? Yeah, can you give me 2 large pizzas and something to eat?
that's, that's
Hey,
great.
don't ask me because I'm gonna tell you, like, yeah, because I've learned, man. And you're right, people want to help, but sometimes they just don't know how or they don't know what to do. So for those of you that are in the community, man, like if you know a grandparent that's taking care of kids, man, step up to the plate a little bit and help them out. So, and you mentioned this already, and this is huge. Like, talk a little bit about mental health before COVID and then
Mm.
after COVID. Like, how's that really turned our community, especially with our young people? How's that really turned them upside down a little bit?
For everybody, the number one protective factor for your mental health is connectedness.
Okay.
So you think of what COVID did and telling us to isolate and to shelter. Talk about this thing. I mean, social media should be called anti-social media.
Antasha.
It is
Okay.
just so bad as far as people are texting instead of talking. But I think particularly COVID did so much harm to us. And frankly, I mentioned, Rogers Behavioral Health. We
Uh-huh.
do eating disorders and OCD. Those two things are way up right now
Really?
because
Okay.
in a world where you can't control anything during a pandemic, you can't control what you do and how you act and what you eat. And a lot of kids have really overreached in, and they are seeking more increased levels of help for
Mhm.
OCD and eating disorders. Plus, I will say, just part of COVID, many research studies have shown that 25% of people who get COVID are going to have clinical anxiety or depression. And I know that happened with two of our family members as
Really?
well, that about 3 months after they had COVID and COVID symptoms, they were really impacted hard for another 4 to 6 months with anxiety and depression.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So what's the solution? Is there one to kind of help turn that around?
Again, it's just anything you can do to get out and exercise and to connect with people, connect with family members,
Mhm.
connect with friends. If all you can do is social media, that's great. If all you can do is a phone call, that's great. But if you have the chance to, go to a concert, walk around the block with somebody, exercise, do something in public, anything you can do to increase that connectedness, that's going to help your mental fortitude and mental strength.
Yeah, and some, but now in reality, I mean, sometimes that's hard, especially for some people. Concerts and getting out, spending money, because COVID kind of took the income away from a lot of people.
Hmm.
So we're gonna talk about that. Especially in the low income communities, and especially because I know me and Tempest, we talk about this a little bit. And I just want to get your point of view on it, especially within the Black community. I know people say, well, why you keep talking about the Black community? What about the Hispanic community, the Asian community? I mean, these types of community, those things, mental health is something that at least I know from my experience that we just didn't even do it. Your mama just like, get it together, like, get it together now. I'm gonna give you a reason,
Yes.
and so we just didn't really think about that, or we just say, oh, that's just old crazy Eddie in the corner over there, or she just, but really we just never really took it seriously. So how can we begin to remove that within these communities? Like, this is something serious. Like we really need to start looking at that. So what are some of the things that you've seen that works, or some of the things we should be looking at?
That's a really good question. Um, you know, a couple of things. When you do get help, it is more effective for you to get help with a therapist that's like you. So,
Okay.
being a strong Christian black male, Michael, you probably would not get the most benefit from a white atheist woman counselor, I mean,
Right,
type of
right,
thing.
right.
And there is a real dearth, there's a real shortage of black therapists out
Okay.
there. So that's number one. Number two, I would say that even though let me just tell you a little bit about suicides, because
Okay.
suicides are up.
Yeah.
Suicide is the ninth leading cause of death in Tennessee, and among
Wow.
young people, it's the second leading cause of death. And while most people who die by suicides are white, that blacks have actually four times more attempts than white people.
Wow.
And so you really start looking at mental health, mental illnesses. They don't discriminate. I
Right.
mean,
It don't. It don't.
it does not matter
Rich,
what's
poor,
going on. It
it don't care.
it doesn't. It doesn't. And it has nothing to do with weakness or character. It has to do with your brain. And
Right.
and we can't control what happens to our heart and kidneys and brains and things like that. So so I will say that, but studies have shown that Black Americans have 20% more mental illnesses or issues going on than some other races or ethnic groups.
Okay.
And I think that to some degree, the Black community has done a really great job saying, tough it up, man up, um, kicking the pants. I mean, but I would say that the vast majority of people do need some type of help, some type of therapy, some type of resource and access.
Right.
And unfortunately, the Black community has been discriminated upon or not had access to those. But I know many of my Black friends have said that psychology and mental health, that is all a whiteness issue. That's a white issue. And because serial killers are mostly whites,
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they
so
are.
I would just say don't close the door to that, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, that we all need to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, because we never really think about that. I mean, like even as parents, even with our kids, we just say, well, they just need this, or they just need to quit being lazy, or they just need to, grow up, or they just need to do this
Right.
and just need to do that. But really, if they're having mental issues, well, they can't grow up, or they can't stop doing what they're doing. And I think as a parent, and I'm learning myself, is that I have to begin to parent differently, because that could be an issue. And like you said, which we're going to talk about barriers, is that if that is an issue for them, it may be hard for them to even just admit, because if I know I've heard this, like mom or dad, or they'll say, well, I just can't seem to get it together. Well, why can't you get it together? Get it together, and we almost threaten them to get it together, but we never think, because you made a great point, we cannot control our brain sometimes. I never thought of it like our brain needs to be fixed.
Mhm.
And I just never thought of it till you mentioned like the arm and the leg. We take care of those things, but the brain. And I think within our families, sometimes we forget that there are some mental issues going on in our families too.
Yeah, we got to give our kids the right tools that they can use to train themselves in good habits, good decision making,
Right.
and that's going to play just as much of a part as sometimes getting them even extra help with a therapist or a counselor or a
Right.
coach or something like
Well,
that.
because like I think about me, I think about my life, and sometimes it's not right, but I mean that's just the way I parent. Like COVID affected me, so I know as an adult it affected me. I mean, man, my goodness, what did it do to my kids? Because they're
Hmm.
already trying to figure out all this other stuff, because they're so into them, like they've missed high school, like like for instance, my oldest son, like his whole football season was canceled his last year of high school. Then they graduation was canceled for some of the kids, prom was canceled, the little scene, all this stuff that they'd been looking forward to all year got canceled. And then unfortunately, they all experienced suicide with other kids. And I mean, all this stuff that's going on inside their heads, like how do they, if I don't know how to formulate stuff going on inside of my head, how do I expect my 16, 17-year-old to do the same thing?
Yep.
Do
And they're dealing with hormones
Yeah,
and
yeah.
girlfriends, and
Yeah.
their brain's not even fully developed until they're in their low 20s.
Yeah. So, and I think sometimes as parents, so I want to say this for parents, sometimes we put too much expectations on our kids, and we have to take that COVID bigger than I think we really are. And that goes for the schools and some other stuff, but I'm just want to talk about families that we need to take that a little more serious. And so when we talk about the things that you just mentioned, what are some of the barriers that you know of? And I got a couple of them that I want to talk about, barriers as far as the community going to mental health. What are some of the barriers that we see that prevents us from getting there?
Yeah, the number one barrier has always been the stigma associated with mental health. People feel shamed, or am I defective? Am I crazy?
Right.
Crazy is kind of the 4-letter word in mental health. It's like, no, there's, in fact, you're weak not to ask for help. If you're asking somebody for help, you're strong.
Right.
But that stigma associated with mental health continues to be the biggest barrier. And again, I think that we should look at our sports heroes, our armed force military,
Right.
People who are strong, that know that it's the right thing to get the right help at the right time. I think that we mentioned kind of paying for it, using your insurance. I will say one benefit that has come across due to COVID is now telehealth, and how people can get counseling or therapy through video, on their phone, on their computer. So even in rural areas, while there may not have been a psychologist in that county, at least now there's telemedicine and telehealth, to where they could do that. But if you don't have insurance, there are some barriers there to payment. Some places are fortunate enough to have like the mental health cooperative or Centerstone or volunteer behavioral health. And in Tennessee, they get what they call safety net money every July. So, so there's a whole new influx of safety net money for these places now. Now, when it comes May and June, they've run out,
Right.
but there's like people who were kicked off of TennCare 10 years ago, or people who don't have any insurance at all. There is safety net payments already made to these facilities if you can get to them, and they could help you. So those are some of the barriers that I see when it comes to access, is the stigma, payments, and insurance.
So I guess you better get there right now, because this is July.
Hey, they're ready for
you. Better run down there before they say we ain't got no more money. And I like what you said earlier too. And sometimes that's a hard conversation to have, is that one of the stigmas is it's mental health is too white. It's just too white. I'm not going, because first of all, you don't know anything about me. And I know me and Tempest talk about this a little bit. Like, I can't connect to you because you don't know me. You have no idea what I went through. So that's a huge barrier in itself. And so talk about that a little bit, about, even though we may not be the same color. And I know you mentioned, I'm not going to go to a atheist or anything like that, but talk about that a little bit, about how hard that is for blacks and whites and other ethnic groups to go to a different ethnic group for mental health.
It is hard, and I can understand that. I'll never understand a woman. I may not understand somebody who's gay. I may not fully understand someone who's black or Asian, because I'm a white straight male. But we're all human, so to some degree you can always benefit. And I know I ended up getting one of my degrees at Tennessee State University, and again, being
TSU,
I did. Yeah,
boy, you black?
So
no, I just playing. I'm just playing, y'all. I know y'all know.
And I learned so much.
Right,
and we would have frank discussions, like this too. But there are great groups in town. One of them is called Experience Mental Health. You could also go. There's a Black Therapist Association, and you can Google to find that help from somebody who's more like you. But there is, again, I think the stigma of mental health is even stronger in the African
Community.
American community. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that it is just that much more misunderstood or looked down to, and it takes somebody strong to say, I need some help. Just
Right.
like my sports heroes or armed forces hero, that you've got to find a way to overcome that, because everyone needs help at some point,
Yeah, and I think we're just having conversation. I think with the environment that we're living in, especially where you grow up, that mental health is we see that as no excuse. I mean, we
Mhm.
really do. We see that as no excuse, that you still need to get it together regardless of what you're going through. But through the ACEs, and they call them ACEs now. I think we all was going through ACEs back in the day.
Yep. Yep.
We just didn't know what they were. And so, with all of that going on, I mean, I'm really understanding now that a lot of times that's what's wrong. Like, you experience some divorce, and you've seen things in the streets, no more than somebody that's been to Afghanistan, and the things that they've experienced over there would do. Some kids experience that just in their neighborhood. Like, they see people getting shot every day, beat up every day, getting arrested by the police every day, or being harassed, or those types of things really affect our kids in our community. And so I think our parents, or even our uncles, or even teachers, or even the police, they forget that these kids are traumatized. Like, these things are truly affecting them. So the things that you're expecting them to do, it gets affected. They just don't do them because all the stuff that they're dealing with.
That's a great point. I'll tell you about one study we did with Mental Health America. We contracted with some therapists to go down to that 37209 zip code where Fisk and TSU and Meharry are, and
Mhm.
they would connect with young pregnant women, and talk to them about stress, anxiety, depression. And the women there were saying, well, no, I know I just had a child 10 months ago and another child 10 months prior to that. It's like, man, you're not even giving your body time to rest and recuperate after
Right.
9 months of pregnancy. And they were saying they're fine. Well, when they were screened for anxiety, depression, mental, it was out. I mean, it
Off
was
the
through the
charts.
roof. It was.
Right.
And it's because these women, many of them grew up with, single parent, maybe some type of abuse, maybe in a neighborhood where violence was commonplace,
Right.
but they don't even know how stressed out and wigged out or depressed, or they don't know any difference. And once we started getting them passes to the Y, and getting them together for a support group, and healthy foods, and boundaries in their lives,
Right.
life totally changed for
Change.
them and their families.
Wow.
And again, I'm not saying everybody needs therapy, but to be with like-minded people and have a support group and be able to talk about your troubles and have frank discussions, that is a great first step in getting your mind in the right place.
Yeah, and I think our young people don't realize that, that really helps. Like, you just having a group of guys that y'all can just talk honestly.
Hmm.
I think that got to be vulnerable. You got to be, and I think we used the word last time, authentic. You got to be
Yes.
authentic. And I think a lot of times, because of the communities that we grow up in, that we can't do that. Like you said earlier, that it is a sign of weakness. Like, if you cry, or you talk about your soft side, or you talk about your issue, that's a sign of weakness.
Hmm.
Man, I don't want to hear that, man. Just do what you need to do, make it happen. Well, that's the problem. I can't make it happen, and that's what's frustrating me.
Yep. And then we're smoking with our mouths, we're drinking with our mouth. Why don't we talk with our mouths?
Yeah,
Why don't we
yeah, most
connect?
definitely,
Yeah.
most
So we
definitely.
definitely need to just have those frank discussions and talk to
But
people.
Tom, the biggest thing that I've also seen too is that sometimes parents are just not equipped. Like
Hmm.
you just mentioned that, like, if the parents don't know, then how do they help their kids? Like, how do they do that? Like, how do we, families need to be equipped for that.
Do you know? And I will have to just say, parents are no less equipped than maybe some of our primary care physicians,
Yeah,
because they
yeah,
they should be screening for depression, anxiety, and mental health. But they know that if somebody tested positive, where are the resources? Where do I send them? Where do I
yeah.
refer?
That's a good
Because
point. That's a
people
good point.
don't know. And I tell people, it's almost like if my parents died, and they were saying, well, what funeral home do you want to use? It's like, man, my parents live in Texas. What funeral? How do I know? It's
Yeah.
the same thing when you're
Same thought.
experiencing anxiety, depression, some type of mental health crisis, you or your children, and you're told find some resources. Where do you turn? And so
Right. Right.
again, just to point out those groups like Mental Health America or NAMI, I mean, they're just like the Heart Association or Kidney Foundation or Cancer Society, but they focus strictly on mental health, and they are there to hold your hand and guide you and provide you the right resources that you need, even if you just need to just talk. But Mental Health America and NAMI are two great advocacy organizations that can provide you some
Okay.
resources.
Here's another barrier. Having a hard time getting through the process for mental health. Do you think the process is too long, too much paperwork, too much red tape? I mean, just trying to get in to see somebody and all that you got to go. Is that, you think that's an issue? We could do better with that?
It is. It really is. That's why I mean, at least with support groups and 12 steps, you just show up and you're
Right.
you're in. So I love that. But again, I just started my job, and I cannot tell you,
Right.
switching into a new insurance and filling out paperwork for how I'm going to get prescriptions or how I'm going to use email. I mean, all of this paperwork has been
Right.
a true barrier.
Yeah.
And again, I would really, point you to different ministries to access, or even charitable clinics,
Okay.
which, even if you have insurance, you could go to Matthew Walker, Neighborhood Health, any of these charitable clinics. A lot of them will have mental health counseling and medication management. So you don't have to, go through all that rigmarole. But that can definitely be a real barrier.
Past experiences,
Past experience. Oh yeah,
negative past
I'm
experiences.
telling you, yeah, it that can why would I ever come for a follow-up appointment or follow through with my medication regimen when I felt totally disrespected by
Right.
that psychiatrist or therapist who was not good. That really bums me out, and I think that a lot of people don't realize even how culturally offensive they are, or
Right.
how they might disrespect you and unintentionally. I'm sure, but yes, I think that if you've had a negative past experience, I would just say, join a support group, or even an online support group, and find out what doctors or therapists worked well for somebody else, so you don't have a repeat experience of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's kind of
So,
like that whole which is another subject, that whole church hurt thing. You get hurt in one
yes.
church, and every church is bad, and one pastor does something and every pastor is bad. So yeah, it's kind of like the same deal. Police, do our
Oh,
police, or just police in general, do you feel they need more mental health training? And what, how do you think we should, as a community, kind of bring that up, and have that as a bigger issue?
I do. I see groups like Murfreesboro Police and Nashville Metro Police. They actually have extensive training on mental health,
Okay.
but I don't know about, um, you know,
Woodbury.
yeah, what surrounding
Yeah.
counties, or even
Fayetteville.
county health.
Right.
But there's two great trainings. The gold standard, it's called CIT, Crisis Intervention Training, and it's
Yeah.
40 hours of training. Which, who, yeah, I don't know anybody who has enough sheriff or police or first responders to say, I'm going to take my people off the streets for a
For 40
week.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another one that's 8 hours long. It's called Mental Health First Aid. And they actually have mental health first aid for police, mental health first aid for clergy, mental health first aid for teachers. And it's a really great, oh, I recognize that person's having a panic attack. I recognize that person's having some suicide ideation or a
Right.
addiction. But they do need, I feel sorry for police, because they're not trained to be social workers and
Right. Right.
counselors. And but fortunately, many of them are starting to divert people who need mental health help to volunteer behavioral health or mental health cooperative or Centerstone. I'm also really impressed right now in July 2022. We have Metro Nashville police that are starting to develop something they're called a co-response team.
Yeah.
And it's
Yes.
social workers that go
Go out
out.
on the scene.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like, wow, that's great. That lets our police focus on crimes, and social workers or certified peers really focus on, some other community hurts and pain that just need as much attention, but by the right
But
people.
do you think they need to have, because we've talked about this a little bit, do they need to have the heart to say, I need help? Like I'm talking about like the police, pastors, people in that position, because sometimes, police officers feel powerful, like, I don't need help, I can handle this. But do they have to have a heart of saying, you know what, I do need help. I need to understand this a little bit more because, my wife works with the special ed, excuse me, students in high school, and some of them dudes are pretty big. Like them
Hmm.
dudes are big,
Hmm.
but they have a mind of a 3-year-old. You know what I'm saying? And so if one of those police officers catch that dude out at night, if he escaped the house, because that's always one of her fears. She's like, what if one of my kids get out at night and and one of those police officers approach them? They're three mentally, but the police officer may not know that. So
Yeah. Yeah, police, there's for our minds, it's not just that you have an IQ, but you also have an EQ. You have an
right,
emotional IQ.
right,
And, for police that undergo, they see trauma, they see suicides, they see shootings, they need help and compassion and peer
right,
groups as well to get
right,
the
right.
help they need. It's just like chaplains that go into hospital rooms one after the other,
Yeah,
abuse, death, tragedy. We all need to get help. But yeah, if you call, the police, if you call a first responder, you definitely will need to be able to tell them, hey, this is my son that needs to get help, and this is, their situation, or please be safe because this isn't a violent crisis. This is maybe a mental health call. So
right,
it
right.
does go, both ways when it comes to the police. They need help, but they also need to know what they're going into so they kind of go in with the right mindset.
Well, we're gonna finish up with this couple of questions. So you've been in the mental health for a long time, and so kind of give us an overview of the whole mental health facilities. How do you feel they really help? I don't know if you want to go into some of the disadvantages, but just as an overall theme for mental health facilities, how do you really feel that they can really help us?
So I mentioned I'm not a clinician. I'm not a
Right,
licensed
right,
therapist.
right.
And so I was under the misunderstanding that some of these mental health facilities, it had something to do with straight jackets. It had something to do with lying on a couch.
Right, banging into the
I'm
wall.
telling you, these
Right.
places are like med spas. You
Wow.
walk in, and these are professionals that want to help you. If
Okay.
you ever walk into volunteer behavioral health or Vanderbilt Hospital or Trust Point Psychiatric Hospital, these places are beautiful and they're filled with caring people. And just like we might go to the doctor when the doctor asks some personal questions. Do you use drugs? Do you have sex outside of your relationship? Do it's like we're ashamed. Let me tell you, no, you cannot make any of these professionals ashamed. They want to help you. You could
Okay.
say, I am, thinking about ending my life. I'm self-medicating. I am
Mhm.
coping in the most unhealthy ways possible, and all they want to do is help you. So I
Right.
would say, don't don't worry about that stigma about going to get help from these facilities, whether it's uh, weekly counseling session or being hospitalized or something in between. And there's 3-hour sessions, 8-hour sessions, daily sessions, but you can get the right help you need. And Mental Health America and NAMI can help guide you to those
Well, cool.
places.
Well, it's great. Well, listen, we have to make sure we keep our youth up to date because our youth are going through a lot. Also with our families, right? Because if our young people are going through issues, most definitely our parents are going through issues, and then our families are going through
Mhm.
issues. And so, like Tony Evans says, and if our families are going through issues, then our communities are going through issues.
Yes.
And so we need to be more aware. We need to be more aware, y'all. Come on now. We got to get on the mental train. Like we all need it. I wish I would have brought it with me, but I didn't bring it with me because I don't want to mess the quote up. But it kind of, the lady kind of said something like, she said, uh, people that live in poverty, if they spend their money on mental health, we call it foolishness. But if the middle class or the rich spend money on their mental health, they call it a vacation. And that's the
Love
stigmas.
that. Yeah.
It's the stigmas. Like, they need the same type of mental health that we need too. So I want to close this out with, what is your favorite scripture?
I actually have two. One
Cool.
is Deuteronomy 16:9 says, "The eyes of the Lord look to and fro throughout the earth, that He might strengthen a person's heart who's fully committed to Him."
Okay.
The second one I mentioned already, the Luke 2:52, that Jesus increased in stature and in wisdom and in favor with God and man, and just kind of focusing on the physical, spiritual, social, and
Right.
mental aspects.
Hey, I love the Lord. I do. And I know that He can make some serious changes in our life. But until He does,
That's
call
right.
your mental health co-op and get you some help,
Yes.
because mental health is super, super important. Hey, Tom, man, I want to thank you for coming and hanging out with us in the 11th hour. It's great knowledge. Man, you got a lot of knowledge.
Thank you so much. And Rogers Behavioral Health thanks you. And again, I just want to leave everybody with that one resource. If you just go to mhascreening.org, take a screening. Number one, they're just trying to do as many screenings as possible, and they're anonymous, evidence based, and who knows, you might be able to help somebody just by sharing mhascreening.org.
You know what? I don't know. I don't know if how I could do that, but maybe we need to put that up somewhere where maybe you can give that to me and I can put that out for people to do. I may go do that myself, just kind of see where I'm at.
It's really great, I mean, sometimes you answer the questions and you're like, well, it seems like everybody would be depressed, but other times you take them and you're like, oh dang, I'm kind of falling in the middle of the road.
Yeah,
Maybe I ought to just implement some self-care, take some
self
time
care.
off.
Take some, and that's always good because every job don't let you do that.
Yep.
So you could. All right, y'all. It's your boy Pastor Mike, aka 90s number 5. This is the 11th hour where we talk about our youth, we talk about our families and community. I want to thank Tom for coming by, giving us some more insight on mental health, especially in the Black community. Y'all get out there, man. Get out there, get your health together, get your mental health together. Quit beating on them kids all the time, because sometimes they just need you to love on them and understand what they're going through. And families are super important for our community because it makes everything work together. So I just encourage you guys to check out some of those. I'm gonna put some of those out, and you guys go check those out. And remember, always make movements, not just moments, because it's about making a movement and just not just having a moment. All right, y'all. I'm out. Peace.